Great to see you. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Woo.
Yes.
Liam, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Andrew. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I am so pumped for my book and the book tour starting on Tuesday. And it's a pleasure to be able to talk to so many awesome supporters of Humanity Forward, which is one of the things that I'm proudest of in my entire life, certainly in my career, is being a part of starting Humanity Forward. So Humanity Forward, awesome org, trying to get cash into people's hands. How can you be against that? But thank you, Liam, and thank you to everyone who helped make Humanity Forward a reality.
Oh, well, thank you, Andrew. I'm very excited that we get to have this event here tonight with Andrew and now over 300 of Humanity Forward supporters here and more coming in. So I'm very glad to get this thing kicked off. We've got a lot to cover, a lot to talk about. So I will just say, first of all, that I would like to take a moment before we kick off to let everyone know that Andrew's views as expressed on this event are not necessarily representative of Humanity Forward or Humanity Forward Foundation, which means so that Andrew can speak his mind. And that's what we're here to dive into. Now, tonight, what I'm really excited about, and I think what a lot of you are excited about as well, this is going to be the first of a series of events that Humanity Forward is going to host with thought leaders and authors diving into different topics that are relevant to all of us. And I think this is as great a fit as any for obvious reasons. So tonight, Andrew's going to be sharing with us about his book, Forward, which I should mention. Yes, you can see it there. All of you can order, or you can pre-order now at andrewyang.com. And of course, we all encourage you to do so. And on andrewyang.com, you can also see the book tour that Andrew mentioned earlier. And so look for the spot nearest to you and maybe you can go get a book signed.
DC, Philly, Boston, New York, of course, Chicago, Des Moines, couldn't miss Des Moines, San Francisco, Irvine, Atlanta, Denver, going all over the place. So tell your friends, show up. We'll have a delightful time. Sign some books, talk about the future of the country. And I promise that even though we're going to spend some time talking about it right now, the book talk will be completely different. It's like I wrote another book. It'll be like I wrote two books. Or maybe if tonight's good, you can tell your friends, be like, hey, like, you know, I saw Yang talk his book and you should check it out.
Absolutely. I do want to say up front, because I want to give people the opportunity to do this, because I know a lot of you have questions. A lot of you submitted questions beforehand, which are fantastic. We're going to be answering some of those this evening. And then, but if you have a question or you didn't get to submit a question or you have another question that you want to ask, email it into us at info@humanityforward.com. We've got people monitoring the email. We're going to be pulling questions and asking them to Andrew so that you can get your answers. Again, that is info@humanityforward.com. So send in your questions. With that, Andrew, I'm going to turn over to you. I think everyone here knows you, but if you just want to give a brief, first of all, before we get into any questions, introduction of yourself and of what inspired you to write this book.
I came off the presidential trail in March of 2020, and it had been such a whirlwind number of months, you can imagine. So many of you were there with us, helping fuel the campaign. And incredibly proud of everything we accomplished. We helped advance cash relief as a real practical solution that right now is impacting tens of millions of American families. But in March of 2020, I came off the trail and then COVID hit and I was scrambling to do everything I could to help. So we started Humanity Forward and started distributing cash, ended up distributing $8 million or so over those months. And then also started an advocacy/lobbying org. The People's Lobby, as I like to think of it. But during that time also, I was trying to process and reflect what had happened on the presidential trail. And I wanted to document it as quickly as I could because, memories are still kind of fresh. Though I will confess I had done zero reflection on the trail, Liam was there and other people were there, but it's like, you're just essentially plunging from one event to the next and trying to knock out this interview or that phone call and the rest of it. So some people ask me, it's like, hey, did you journal during the campaign? I wish I had, truly. So for me, the processing began in earnest in March and then continued through all of last year. And I didn't want to just tell a story about running for president, though Liam knows the first section of the book is stories of running for president, where I was trying to draw lessons and themes. But I was also trying to figure out what I'd learned about making change happen. Let's say universal basic income is your goal. Like, what does it take to make universal basic income happen based upon my deep foray into national politics, our media landscape, trying to figure out how legislation passes. And I talked to like literally, I think 65 members of Congress. So I started to get some inkling as to what we would need to do. And I also did research during this time. I referenced Ezra Klein and Lawrence Lessig and Catherine Gale and others who've done some very deep thinking about our political system. Jonathan Haidt, want to shout out Jonathan Haidt's incredibly profound. And so that's what led to this book, Liam, was my trying to figure out, okay, if the what, I used to believe that the problem was that no one knew about universal basic income. And we all spent the last several years trying to change that, being like, hey, universal basic income, it's obvious, it's sensible, let's do it. So that's the what. 55% of Americans, last I checked, were for it. A higher percentage were for some version of cash relief. So if that's the what, the question then that hit me was the how. It's like, how can you actually get this passed? And that's what the book is about everything I've learned over the last several years, and then how we can actually make it happen. So that's the process through which I ended up writing the book. I'm really excited about it. Liam does show up. I guess maybe that's one reason why he digs it. But other people on the campaign also show up. But the book is something of like a combination of personal narratives, which frankly, you kind of need to make a book fun and readable, but also solutions and ways we can actually get real massive measures like universal basic income across the finish line.
Absolutely. That's fantastic, Andrew. So to kind of frame the questions that are coming in from the now over 400 attendees we have here, I wanted to just ask you right up front, let's dive into the meat here and the substance. What are, call it the top 2 or 3 substantive reforms or measures that you're putting forward or that you've recognized over this experience that you think are critical to reducing polarization and making the country a healthier place?
Yeah, I do want to preface it with the fact the book is in significant measure about how polarized we become, which is something that I certainly saw out on the trail. And our media and social media landscape and our political incentives all are driving the polarization in various ways. And that's what I think we have to fix also to get something like universal basic income passed. So right now, if you're a member of Congress, there is a 92% chance that you're going to be reelected in any given cycle. This despite the fact that our popular satisfaction with Congress is maybe 28%. That's a very, very big gulf. And you have to look at the system and say, okay, why is it then that incumbents have such an incredibly high reelection rate? And the main reason is that 83% of congressional districts are safe seats. They're going to be either Democrat or Republican. And so if you get to the general election, you're going to win. So then what is the real danger? The real danger is that you're going to be primaried within your own party. And so to keep my job, if I'm a legislator, I just need to avoid a serious challenge from within my own party. And that ends up distorting my incentives in various ways. It makes it so I'm in lockstep with my party, because if I deviate, then that becomes a big problem for me. It makes me more responsive to extreme points of view. It makes me much less prone to compromise. So this is the structural reason why it seems like members of Congress don't act like human beings, frankly, or even they showed up as reasonable human beings. If you take a reasonable human being and put them in a system that rewards unreasonableness, you're going to get higher levels of unreasonableness. And that's what we have. So the biggest reform we could make that would both reduce polarization very quickly and dramatically increase the odds of something like universal basic income passing would be to change the nature of the voters that each individual legislator is accountable to from the most extreme 20% on one side or the other to just 51% of all voters. And that sounds like magic, but if we did that, it would change things overnight, and it is doable. It turns out that all of the rules around how legislators get elected are determined at the state level. There's nothing in the Constitution about it. There's actually nothing in the Constitution about political parties either. And it turns out the founding fathers would be shocked and horrified that for whatever reason we have only two. And I do want to deviate for a moment here, Liam. If you look at other democracies in the world, the UK has 5 political parties, Sweden has 8 political parties, Netherlands has 18 political parties, and we have 2. And it's a very fragile system, because if you have one party, for example, start to have serious problems, then that's half the system. And so the biggest single change we could make that would both make real solutions more possible and reduce polarization by improving incentives, is to convert and shift from closed party primaries to open primaries and then ranked choice voting, so that you could have a multiplicity of options. And this can be determined at the state level. I think you're on mute, bro.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So my only other framing question that we're going to go into the audience questions is, so you talked about how polarized we are and how the incentives are set up in such a way to further that polarization, not help it. I'm curious to dive into, in this book, I think there's a lot, people know the country's polarized. There's something concern a lot of people have. People see it around them all the time. Do you think that this is the kind of book that people will leave feeling more overall more depressed about the way things are going, or they're going to leave it feeling more optimistic about the fact that there's actually some solutions to this?
I think it's uplifting in a particular way, Liam, which is that it kind of spells out why we're being set up, to be at each other's throats, why we're being set up to be frustrated by the lack of progress. As soon as you actually realize that the system's not designed to actually solve our problems or answer to us, then you're like, oh, wait a minute, like maybe I should actually take a step back and then figure out how to make the system work better, as opposed to being within the system, banging our head against a wall, being like, why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? So I like to think it's uplifting in that way, though some could look at it the other way and say, hey, it's depressing how you've illustrated how our system isn't set up for success. And again, I took pains to try and make it kind of an interesting story, where I talked about my own experiences, but I also pretended the reader was running for Congress, which maybe some of you have thought about doing. And then I try to spell out, okay, like here's the obstacle at point A, B, C, D, E, and then let's say you get into Congress, then here are the incentives for F, G, H, I, like try and make it as real and direct as possible, in part because, I wanted people to understand these problems on a human level. And I'm not someone who thinks that people are, nefarious. I mean, there are some nefarious people, obviously, but what Ezra Klein said is that if you put a good person in a corruptive system, then the corruptive system will win with ease. And I think he's right about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to go to the audience questions. So for those of you who are interested in asking your question about Andrew's book, Forward, again, send it to info@humanityforward.com. But we have questions already rolling in, including some of those that were submitted beforehand. So, Andrew, the first question is from Lewis in New York State. He asks, one of the core values of your new book, Forward, is to work with those we disagree with. What are some of the ways we can mend the division in the country as individuals?
Thanks, Lewis. It sounds like you got a bit of an advanced peak, which makes me happy. So I do talk about the principles of grace and tolerance as being core to a movement that could both unify and heal the country. And it's one reason why I'm so focused on these structural incentives, because I'm very cognizant of the limitations of my making really touching speech saying, hey, let's all come together, we love each other, and then you just go back to fighting each other, like 5 seconds later because of the incentives. But right now, 57% of Americans are frustrated by the duopoly and want some kind of alternative. And so if we can present ourselves as people who are able to disagree with someone, but then still regard them as a human being and a friend and someone worth listening to, then I think that example can be very, very powerful, because so many Americans right now are hungry for that, are hungry. So many Americans right now are scared of being judged and attacked. Like if you say something, we all kind of sense that, we're all kind of on tiptoes being like, oh, if I say the wrong thing with the wrong person, then, they're going to think I'm a jerk or a jackass or have very, very bad attitudes or something like that. And so it's by starting to accept ourselves and the people around us and putting a name on that movement, frankly, because this, you have to have a collective that demonstrates this set of values. Liam being a nice guy is fantastic, and that's great. But then if you actually have an umbrella for Liam that other people can say, wait a minute, I want to demonstrate the same attitudes and behaviors, then it can be very powerful in a polarized country. And one of the things that we're seeing right now in Congress, and the thing I'm going to suggest, is if you get 5 to 10% of people excited about some kind of unifying third way, that would change the country. Like you don't need necessarily like 51%. If you have this incredibly polarized country and then you get a critical mass in the middle, you can do a tremendous amount of good.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is a good segue to our next question. This is from Quark K in Seattle. Quark asks, how do you avoid the spoiler effect of new parties?
Thanks, Cork. And I'm so glad you asked this, because I got to say, first there was like the press around the rumors, like, oh, Yang, third party. And then everyone descended on like, oh, he's going to Ralph Nader and spoiler it and the rest of it. And there's a lot of like knee-jerk reactivity to it. And it struck me as so going from like 0 to 60 or whatnot, because I'm deeply practical. And the last thing you want to do is incentivize people to do something that isn't going to lead to an outcome they're excited about. But this is one reason why we need ranked choice voting in these races, so that you can vote for whomever you like and then rank the next person second, the next person third, and then you get rid of the spoiler effect. But the duopoly and then bludgeoning us with the spoiler effect is really not the way to go. You know what I mean? I mean, no one thinks this duopoly is humming. We're again kind of demonstrating the polarization and the dysfunction. We're 130 years in. And so all you need to do is shift to ranked choice voting. And then all of a sudden it's like, look, vote for whomever you like and we'll compete and win your votes because we're awesome, would be the attitude. But instead the attitude is like, oh, we're going to keep this archaic system where it's zero sum between two alternatives. And then if anything else tries to enter the system, we're going to say, oh, you're going to enable like the enemy to win. And it's artificial. It's like, well, that's true if you retain the archaic system and it's zero sum and they're like two alternatives and it's a third. But all you do is turn the dial and say, ranked choice voting, do whatever you'd like. And my goal isn't around any necessarily like individual new entrant. Again, UK at 5, Sweden at 8, Netherlands at 18. I think that system would just be much more robust and resistant to corruption or demagoguery. And so what you want to do is you want to make the system stronger and more robust. And it requires a bit of vision. It requires someone to try and put down their partisan hat. And I'm going to suggest to you all something that this really is the key. I was asked this earlier today, where if you're a Democrat and you're deeply concerned about the future of our democracy, because let's say you think that there's going to be someone who comes along and takes office that doesn't care about constitutional protections or democracy and vote counts and things like that, then you would want to do exactly what I'm talking about. Like you could say, look, let's try and like eke out like the wins and keep everything at like 51%, and then like we can like stave off these negative scenarios. Or you could look at the system and say, you know what, like let's make it so that it's genuinely vibrant and dynamic, and you have different polls and different voices. And then if there is a party that comes along, it's not going to have 51%. It would be at some lower number, and then it would need to get someone else on board. Like that's just a much better, more principled approach if you're concerned about democracy, which, by the way, we all should be. Like I'm 100% on board there. It's like we should be freaked out. But the correct response to the freak out is to make the system sturdier and more resilient.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. Our next question, I think, goes to the strength of our democracy, speaking about the next generation. So this is from Jennifer in Frederick, Maryland. Jennifer asks, where do you see the future of politics going with the younger generation coming up through the system? They have been through the worst financial war and now a pandemic. Do you see a change coming in the political atmosphere for them?
Thanks, Jennifer. One of the things I'm proudest of is that so many young people got excited about my campaign, won the Iowa youth vote, which ordinarily is a predictor, though it was not in my case. But we've shafted young people on every level, economic, educational, health, like you name it, climate change, polarization. Like we just left you a mess squared, or like really, it's deeply immoral what we've done to young people. 56 years old, Senator 62 years old. You can see that we essentially have like a gerontocracy up and down Congress and clearly, in other offices. So I would love to change that. I could give you the usual party line about, oh, young people are going to inherit this. You're being set up so that you're not going to be able to contend. So here's one fix that would help transform our government for the better and make young people a much bigger part of it, at least at the top, which I'm going to suggest is, what we should be striving for. 18-year term limits for members of Congress, each house. It's a long time, but all of a sudden you'd see different leaders rotating in to a much higher degree than they do right now. And the way to pass it is exempt current lawmakers, so they don't vote themselves out of office. They can stay until they lose or die. But then you'd end up rotating in new leadership, because the reality is you need $1 to $2 million to be competitive in a House race. And what young person can access that kind of money? So, the people who end up running are people who can access that, who tend to be more established and older. And so you have a system that will consistently disregard the viewpoints of young people, both in terms of legislative posts, but also because money talks. And right now, most of that money is in the hands of older Americans and corporations.
Fantastic. That makes a lot of sense. I think, again, a great segue to our next question. This is from Rashad in Boise, Idaho. Rashad asks...
I just want to throw in before we get to Rashad. By the way, 3/4 of Americans are for term limits, 75%. I mean, think about that. Like, it's just common sense. You go to America and be like, hey, do you think people should be able to stick around, for 35 years? And like, no. Everyone's on board with that. I just want to throw that out there.
Oh, thank you for that addition, Andrew. It's a great stat to know. So Rashad in Boise, Idaho, Rashad asks about, hold on, pulling up the question. Here we go. This is sort of related to the issue that we were just talking about. Rashad asks, how can we educate our friends and neighbors? I think Rashad is a student, so our fellow students. How can we educate our fellow students about democracy reform and polarization? Why would reforms make people hate each other more? It seems like the problem is with people, not with politicians.
Thanks, Rashad. It's a tough time, and people are turning against each other in various ways. But I'm old enough to remember a time before social media, a time before even cable news, believe it or not. I mean, I'm old enough dimly to remember when there were like three networks. So we're being turned against each other by social media, and political incentives. They all play a role. And so if you were to try and address the excesses in each of those, you'd at least make some progress towards making us less hateful and divided. Now, of course, there's still human nature, and humanity will always have issues. And if you lead in your own life, then that's the best thing you can do. But we should be looking big picture. It's like, okay, why are things so bad? Why is political stress now at literally civil war levels? And it's because our politicians are rewarded for extremity. It's because our media organizations make more money based upon dividing us into ideological camps. And social media pours gasoline on the whole thing. I think that for a young person, it sounds like, Rashad, you're on the younger side. Social media really is one of the key drivers, and it's making young people more anxious and depressed. It's been shown to reduce your sense of well-being. And so I think that's something that we can legitimately look at and say, well, that's a major issue that government should be examining much more closely.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, we're going to go to our next question. This is from Johnny in West Virginia. Johnny asks, can Andrew explain what his vision of a centrist is and what policies and goals they would strive for?
Thanks, Johnny. I had a conversation about this just now with someone who is a self-proclaimed centrist in Texas. And he's working with another self-proclaimed centrist in Connecticut. And they differ on gun control, as an example. Like that's something that they disagree with each other on. But they agree on the fact that there is a certain baseline of facts we should be able to accept as fact. That they agree that compromise among legislators is a good thing if it moves the ball forward. They agree on trying to include different points of view and not thinking that it's their way or the highway, and that, if someone disagrees with them, then they're wrong or bad, which unfortunately now 42% of people on both sides regard folks who are on the other side politically as literally evil. I think centrism starts by saying, you can disagree with me about just about anything under the sun, and I will not proclaim you to be my enemy. Like if you're at that point, you're probably already most of the way towards being a centrist. And so I think those are some of the principles I would take to heart, Johnny, is that if you think that there's room for disagreement between reasonable people, and you want there to be some kind of baseline of facts, you're probably a centrist.
Thanks, Andrew. Our next question, you mentioned Texas in your answer. Our next question comes from Sani N in Texas. She said, what is your favorite story from the presidential trail in your new book?
My favorite story from the presidential trail was me being at my kid's birthday party, and then another dad asking me, so what do you do? And then I would have a hard time saying, I'm running for president, because it's just the most bizarre thing for a dad to say, and you think I'm Looney Tunes. So I would try and duck the question and say things like, I'm like an author, or I'm working in activism or politics. But for whatever reason, that answer never really ended the conversation. They would just keep asking, and then eventually I'd have to be like, well, I have a presidential candidate. And then that conversation would go on for a solid 15 to 20 minutes. And then the person at the end wouldn't be like, I'm going to help you, I'm going to support you. They'd be like, oh, that's really interesting, good luck with that. So I thought that was like the kind of perspective that most people would enjoy, because I was such an anonymous figure. And then by the time most people met me, they saw me out and about, or maybe on TV. But imagine just frankly, like an anonymous civilian deciding to run for president, and then having to explain that to his kids, classmates, dads, or moms. And that happened to me a lot.
Well, thank you, Andrew. That's this is a very funny story. I think this is sort of a related question here. This is from Tori W in Anaheim, California. Tori asks, what was your most difficult challenge on the presidential campaign trail that you talk about in the book?
The most difficult challenge I talk about in the book is that you become less of a human being than a product yourself. And people act as if you're a leader. But most of the time you're exhibiting what I would consider very poor leadership. So what I mean by that is that, like, to me, an effective leader would be spending a lot of time managing his team and personnel and trying to make the culture positive. And in point of fact, if you're the candidate, you're hustling from interview to phone call to event to rally to calling people and asking for money. And a lot of it is appearance. A lot of it is, I say in the book, it's like the appearance of leadership becomes leadership. But I compare it to running an organization, which I've done. And typically, if you're just running around chasing press, your organization's probably falling apart. Typically, like if you see a CEO just running around trying to chase press, like I would have serious doubts that that company is doing well, because most of the time you're better served by trying to solve problems and get things right. And so that was a real struggle for me. It did end up causing like a particular strain on me, in part because I'm not naturally that extroverted. So I comment in the book about going back to the hotel and having my face muscles literally tired from smiling or making expressions. And I didn't put this in the book, maybe I should have, but like I'd go home and like my wife would just be, essentially she understands me. So she's like, I get it. Like, you're kind of not going to want to be super social. Like when, on the rare days I was home, I wasn't like, hey, let's go hang out with friends or something. Like it would be. So that was an adjustment for me and one of the tougher challenges.
Absolutely.
Hey, Liam, do you remember any of that, Jazz? You around me during this time?
Oh, I remember it. That's for sure. But I think all people who run for office. This is why that's never going to be me. I see too many people how difficult it is to go through it. But this is actually sort of relevant. Going back to Texas, we've got a question here for you, Andrew, from Susan, who's in Austin, Texas. Susan says, "Hi, Andrew. One of the things I really appreciate about you is your positive attitude. It seems you are always or mostly upbeat and cheerful. How do you do it? I think most of the populace of the U.S. is worried, sick, and concerned about our country's future. Thank you, Susan."
Thank you, Susan. I too am worried sick. It's awful what's happening. We are not being set up to succeed. We're setting our kids up also to inherit a very, very tough country and world. So Susan, you can be worried sick and scared and pessimistic and still want to do something about it and be can do and positive about that. I mean, I'm a human being. It's not like, like I obviously have my doubts and struggles like anyone else. But thanks to some of the people who are on this call tonight, I feel like I'm in a very, very rare position where I might be able to do something positive about it. And so that's what I'm going to do to the best of my ability. It's just going to be better for us all if we, even in the face of some very, very difficult facts, still have like a sense of positive change and possibility and optimism. Humanity Forward is one of the most optimistic orgs, I think. I mean, it's literally called Humanity Forward. We're like trying to move humanity forward. And for me, I feel this sacred responsibility that some of you have had a part in bestowing upon me, like this kind of opportunity. I will say too, though, one measure that might help you, Susan, or anyone else, is I try to list several things I'm grateful for every day. And you can repeat yourself because, eventually, I put my kids like every day or whatnot. And it gives you a reminder that despite some of the terrible things that are happening in the world, it's like, okay, like my parents are still alive, my kids are happy and healthy, my wife still puts up with me, I've got a lot of folks who want me to succeed. And that's true. Most of those things are true of, I think, a lot of people on this call. So, as long as you tell yourself these things, remind yourself, I think we can be positive in the face of a very daunting reality.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us need that right now. So thank you for that.
It's a bad time. I confess to it. And I hope that you will see in this book and Humanity Forward and the movement, real solutions out of this. I think our country is kind of yearning for some real solutions, some positivity. I think universal basic income is a big one. And I believe that Forward and open primaries and ranked choice voting is the path to get us there.
Absolutely. So I want to, we've got sort of I'm seeing a extra surge of questions coming in as we head into the final portion of this event. So
this is so fun. I can do this all night. It's so fun.
No, there we go. Well, I'm glad you can, Andrew. Then we'll take some more. So here's what I'm thinking we'll do, because we're getting a bunch of questions that are about specific policy stuff. So we'll do that. I want to tackle some of those. Those are fantastic questions. We're also getting some questions here, sort of going back to, using this as a segue, being optimistic, like you talked about, Andrew, and coming from the difficulty and looking forward to what the solutions are. I want to go to this next question.
Oh, I do want to say for a moment too, Liam, is that some people, I felt like I owed everyone my honest take on what a solution would look like. And some people look at it and be like, oh, that seems hard or something along those lines. But this would work, this is doable, this is real, this is achievable. And that's something I really pride myself in, is that, I'm not going to present something I don't believe. Like this is our best path to real progress. Indeed.
Okay, so we're going to have the cluster of questions that are coming in, sort of about the book, and back to sort of, now we've touched upon the personal side, questions that are about the solutions in the book and the way forward. And then we have some specific policy questions. So on the solutions in the book, we've got a question here from Joyce L. From San Jose, California. And Joyce asks, who do you think your allies and opponents will be in pushing for the changes in this book?
Our allies will be the 50%, 57% of Americans who are fed up and feel like the duopoly is not working, the 60% who think that both parties are out of touch. Not even to blame the people who are in these positions, it's just, again, structural. Now, one of the difficult things about being like in this camp, what's funny is that a lot of them are apolitical, and some of them are independents. And so one of the jokes we tell is like, independents aren't really big joiners. They're like, what does a movement of independence even look like? That kind of thing. What does a movement of apolitical people look like? So those are the people that are going to be allies, people who are solutions oriented, people who will actually take a step back from the system and be like, wait a minute, this system's not set up for success. How do we actually solve the underlying problems? I joked with a group of friends the other night that, again, I don't think this is everyone. Like, I think that some people respond to really emotional appeals. And I was estimating that 10% of us are really rational solution seekers and kind of resistant to the emotional appeals of polarization. And so that's like the group. And again, if we got 10% of Americans on board, we're going to do it like solid and easy. Like, it's going to be great. In terms of people that are going to resist, it's folks who are uncomfortable with change. It's folks who know how to work the current system for their own benefit and will want to keep it that way. It's people who are very, very partisan. It's people who are very, very insecure about what like this new landscape might mean for them individually or for their party, their institution. And so check it out. Let's say I was like a special interest. I figured out pretty well how to keep things from changing right now. And it's not that hard because I just get myself in there and be like, hey, like, these legislators just like, like I give you money, just keep things from shifting. And then if a popular movement comes along and says, hey, we'd like government to be more responsive to people, and here's how, and like, some of them will look at it and be like, wait a minute, I actually don't know what that would mean for me and my interests. And I get paid a lot of money to like keep things in a particular way. So how about I try and keep it that way? And then like my revenue will continue. So that's what we're up against. We're up against a system that's going to want things to stay the same because they figured this system out.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, Andrew. Okay, so our next question, again, sticking with sort of the solutions and the way forward from the book. We've got a question from, also from California. We've got a question from Nicole, who's in Los Angeles. And she asks, how can I explain ranked choice voting to my friends? Nicole's being very modest here. She says, how can I explain ranked choice voting to my friends? I don't even understand it fully, but I think I do.
Thank you, Nicole. So I tried to do this the other day in 15 seconds or less, but it's a system where you get to rank the candidates you want to support up to 5. And then the first candidate who gets 51% of votes wins. And so that those two things, I think people can understand. It's like, okay, I get to rank candidates, and then you don't have to, by the way, you can just vote one candidate and stop there. But you can rank up to 5. And then the first person who gets 50.1% of the votes wins. And so they'll think about that for a second. Actually, let me check. Maybe Nicole can type in like, do you think that explanation would work? How do the rest of you feel? Do you think that would do it? You get to rank up to 5 candidates, and then the first candidate who gets 50.1% of the vote wins.
Okay, we'll see.
Does that work?
Some of the responses that come in. I'll give it a few minutes for people to message in, and we'll see what people are saying. But that seems like a sensible explanation to me. As someone who, even as someone who knows it, it still can be a little bit confusing how it's calculated, but that's a very simple explanation, which makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now we got.
It's something I pride myself on, Liam. It's like I really try and just like hit it on the head.
Exactly, be an explainer. Okay, so now we got some policy questions. I'm curious also, Andrew, I'll add this to some of these questions. It'd be great for you to let us know if these topics are touched upon in the book. And if not, still great to discuss it.
Yeah, I'm happy to say so.
So we've got a question from Craig in New York City, and he asks, what is your opinion of cryptocurrency? Do you think the US should regulate it? And if they do you think that puts the United States behind the curve on technological adoption if other countries are already embracing currencies and their technology?
Craig, I'm a big fan of the blockchain and cryptocurrencies and their potential to add a lot of value. And I do think that taxing them is appropriate. It's not that they shouldn't be regulated at all, but you certainly don't want to discourage innovation or competitiveness. And again, the potential is immense to these technologies. I mean, you could see people being able to have all sorts of innovation in governance, decentralized autonomous orgs, and other things could genuinely revolutionize investment in other fields. So I'm a huge fan, I'm a huge believer, and whatever you do in terms of regulation should, in my mind, be hand in hand with industry to make sure that the rules make sense. And right now, there is some concern that the regulations aren't going to make a lot of sense. They're going to include a lot of people in the definition of broker dealer or the equivalent that should not be in that category.
Gotcha, that makes sense. Okay, so the next one is a familiar topic to probably a lot of people here, UBI. So this is from Joyce in Greenbelt, Maryland. She says, my friends keep asking me how the country can possibly afford UBI. How does UBI help the economy and how would it be funded?
I love it. It's a very, very important question. First, I want to throw out the example that we passed a $2.2 trillion CARES Act last year, which was enough to give every American $6,000. And we got a small fraction of that. We got $1,200. And so we're seeing tons of money get put out into the economy that's not going to families. And if it went to families, we would just pump the money right back into the economy. It would go into locally owned small businesses, to food, fuel, transportation, car repairs, and that money would circulate over and over again through the economy. And oh, by the way, it would make us stronger, healthier, mentally healthier, better able to adjust at the same time. So as long as that's the way we're going to spend the money, that's actually a much better allocation than anything else we can do. And because of that growth, we'd end up getting that money back several times over. Now, there is a need to modernize our revenue system or our taxation system too. And what I was proposing is that if you have immense value that's going to be generated by AI and robots, you should probably tax some of that, because right now the tech companies that own that stuff are essentially not getting taxed. So if you were to harness the true value of some of the innovations that are going on out there, we could realize hundreds of billions of dollars, even trillions in revenue. And that's where we should go as quickly as possible. We should not be trying to tax human labor up the wazoo. You generally try not to tax things that you want more of. And ideally, this money in our hands would help create the next generation of jobs.
That is the goal. We want to be investing in our people and creating economic.
But I do want to follow this up and say again, I think 17% of the CARES Act went to people and families. Mm-hmm. So, or even now, like some of the stuff that's being discussed in Congress. Now, you can say what you want about $3.5 trillion like that. That's enough to give every American $10,000. Just to throw it on out there as like some of the numbers that are going on.
Absolutely. Okay, so we got one more policy question, and we're getting so many now. I've just tallied it up. Just since this event started, we've gotten 200 additional questions, which we're unfortunately obviously not going to have time for all 200. But that is why I encourage you. See, Andrew, I have my prop here as well. Thank you. So I encourage you all, for the questions that we're not going to be able to get to, please. If you haven't already, go to andrewyang.com and you can get your pre-order of the book here. You
could also come to one of our book tour events, and then I'll try and take questions there. So if I didn't get your question tonight, maybe I'll just see you in person.
This is great. This is why I love the Humanity Forward community, because everyone is so active and so involved and has great questions. It's just such a great group of members and supporters. Okay, so policy question for you. Okay, I'm pulling it up. Okay, so this is from Franny L. This is in Florida, and Franny's question is, what is your opinion? Hold on. There we go. Franny L asks, what is your opinion of the new child tax credit? I'm a grandmother, but my daughter is now receiving child tax credit payments starting earlier this summer, period. That's from
Thanks, Franny. Probably unsurprising. I love the child tax credit. It is the greatest anti-poverty measure we've seen in a generation, maybe, by the numbers. People are spending it on the best things possible. People are working more in many cases. And to me, the only issues I have with the child tax credit is that it should be permanent. And we should be broadening cash relief to include people in different types of situations, including people who do not have children. So love the child tax credit. This is the greatest success in policy. 448 economists just signed a letter saying, keep it. And I think we are going to keep it. It's just so powerful and common sense and is doing so much good. And to the extent that Humanity Forward and I have had anything to do with it, it's like the greatest feeling ever, the greatest legacy, like just knowing that 70 million lives are better as a result. So let's just make it happen forever, and then build from there. So support Humanity Forward, and Humanity Forward will make that case to all of the right people. They're doing ACE's job on the Hill. The people's lobbyists, I love Liam and the work so much. It makes me happy anytime I think about it.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. And thank you very much, Franny, for the question. Okay, so now we're gonna, I wanna give you opportunity to do some closing thoughts. Before we get to that, I thought one of the great questions came in during the event. This is from Charisse Z. Charisse Z is coming to us from New Mexico. And Charisse asks, what are your proudest moments and memories that you cover in your book? So it could be from the trail or from anything.
One thing is getting the call that that cash relief was going out to Congress. I mean, feeling like I played a direct role in alleviating poverty was one of the best feelings in my life. On the trail, there was absolutely nothing like showing up in Iowa and New Hampshire and having people who come from all over the country to volunteer for me. You know who you are. I probably saw some of you there. But it's the fact that I could activate people to uproot themselves and try and fight it out for the future is something I'm so touched by and proud of anytime I think about it. And when you walk into that room, you're like, oh my gosh, I really need to fight my heart out to try and freaking win this thing. You know, I mean, like I felt like I was being fueled by you all, or the people that had decided to believe in us. So that's the kind of thing you never forget. On a personal note, I think I had this in my book a little bit. My kids did not care about my presidential campaign until they saw the tour bus in Iowa. And then they were like, oh my gosh, Dad has a bus. And some thoughtful staffer had put some video games in the bus. So in terms of like proudest moments, it's like the thing that made the biggest impression on my kids was the bus.
Absolutely. I remember that. They were definitely not impressed early on. So it's good you had something to impress them with.
They're still not impressed. I'll tell a funny story that's like, it's whatever. But like at one point, one of my kids said to someone, my dad's Andrew Yang, he ran for president. And then Evelyn was appalled that he had actually figured out that was, something he could say that someone would actually like respond to. So we're like, oh no, like, cause we didn't think they understood that.
Yeah, well, they're growing up. Okay, so we're still getting more questions, but I do, as we come here to close to the top of the hour, Andrew, I wanted to give you the opportunity to sort of, as I think people are looking at, they're going to, hopefully tonight, if they haven't already, they'll pre-order the book. As they're getting the book, as they're talking about it with their friends and family, as they're potentially getting it as a gift for people, recommending it to others, what is it you want people to take away from this chat this evening? What is it you want people to get out of this book? What is it you want people to tell others when they're sharing it with people? What's the message that you want to get across to everyone here, so that we can all, on all the attendees here, can sort of be ambassadors of it after tonight?
Thanks, Liam. So grateful to be here with you all. And the biggest opportunity I want to convey to you all is something that's difficult to convey quickly, which is like, what the heck is this book about? You know what I mean? Like, and if you were to say democracy, frankly, someone's going to want to like go to sleep immediately. Like, who the hell wants to read a book about democracy? Like that sounds hella boring, honestly. And so I tried to convey, it's like, look, this is the story of running for president and actually having that get boosted by millions of Americans to a point where I was on 7 debate stages and I had to go through this strange press crucible. And I try and both convey and then reflect on what those experiences are like, and then what that means for a system, and then what that means for how we can actually make things happen. So if there's something I'd want to convey to you all is that, like, one of the things that I've learned over time is that we learn from stories first and foremost. And this book is primarily a story. It's a story about a guy who ran for president and tried to make the biggest change you could think of, which was eradicating poverty. And then what, first, I think is a fun story in the sense that, it's interesting. But then it's what I actually got from that to equip us to conquer the obstacles in front of us. And so hopefully it becomes like a real path forward where you think, okay, things seem kind of intractable and hopeless and polarized and terrible. But there is a real path for us if just enough of us get together and make it happen. This book, I believe, is the most important thing I'll ever do. And there was a point when I thought that about the War on Normal People, where that book was something I was incredibly proud of. There was a long time on the presidential trail, actually, I was still prouder of the book, because the book was like a work, and I felt like it really conveyed a particular idea effectively. Like if someone read it, they'd be like, oh, like I think that there is something going on in the economy and automation's a thing, and something like universal basic income really should be something we consider. Like I was so proud of the book. Anytime I got the book into someone's hand, I'd be like, that's a win, that's a victory. And I said to myself and my wife and whoever would listen, I said, like, if the War on Normal People is my contribution to the world, I will be fine, die happy. Like having like that contribution is like, that's enough. And then at a certain point, the presidential campaign overtook the book, where it's like, oh, the campaign had more impact. And so I became incredibly proud of the campaign. And now I believe that this book is the most important thing I'll ever do, because this book explains why we're so stuck, why things feel like they're not working, and then says, no, you're not crazy. Like, you shouldn't expect it to work because it's actually not designed to work. Like it's designed for something else. And then how we can actually redesign it so that it'll work for us, and it gives real answers, like real hope. Not this kind of hope of like a temporary transitory victory that we know was going to slip out of our fingers like a little while longer, like real lasting hope and a real lasting fix. So I do hope that you pick the book up, that you love it, that you tell friends about it. I would love to see you on the book tour. Please do sign up, bring a friend, and let's get after it, because people need hope right now. And I believe that this is the hope that people are looking for, like a real fix, real solution. And I'll be the first to say, just like with UBI wasn't Andrew Yang's idea. Like, like a lot of people thought of it and fought for it, but before I ever arrived on the scene. This is similar, where some of the key ideas in this book are not mine. They're from brilliant thinkers who diagnosed our problems and said that this is how we can fix them. And my role, just as with UBI, is to bring those ideas to the mainstream. You know what I mean? Like the people who've written on these things, frankly, their books were published in the academic press, and like no one's gonna, you know what I mean? Like there's like a niche, like just like UBI was in a niche. Some of you might have been there, and then my role is to mainstream it. Now my role is to mainstream this, and I would absolutely love your help in doing so.
Well, absolutely. Thank you, Andrew, for that wonderful sort of call to action for all of us. And I want to emphasize again, AndrewYang.com. Go and pick up your copy if you haven't already. AndrewYang.com also for the tour. But I really want to primarily, of course, thank all of you for being such.
Thank you for believing in humanity. You all are the best. I sense that I just love this community so much. Humanity forward is the best.
But I want to thank all of you for joining us and for being such great members of the HF community. There's so many of you I know who I saw who are joining and who have registered for this event, who have been fantastic volunteers and supporters of this organization since day one, or everyone from people who've been with us since the beginning to folks who've joined more recently. So thank you so much to all of you and for being here. I want to say thank you, Andrew, for your forward thinking, for thinking about solving the problems, and for getting us thinking about these ideas that you've laid out here. And of course, it goes without saying, I could not think of a better guest to kick off this series of events that we'll be doing. So if you enjoyed this, please be on the lookout for more events that we'll be doing throughout the rest of a few more toward the end of this year, and then into next year. Look out for these. But Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to mention, again, 2 more things before we go. We're going to be getting some great data after this event. Speaking of data, we're going to be getting some great data after this event on everyone's role here. This is just like we do with everything at this organization. Everyone who's in attendance, all the 400s or however many of you are here now, all of you. So there's going to be a survey that's emailed to you afterward, and we're going to be seeing how different people want to get engaged in this work. So please do fill that out. That's number 1. And number 2, most importantly, again, andrewyang.com for the tour and to pre-order the book. Wish I could see you all to say goodbye, but thank you again, Andrew, for being with us, and thank you all.
Thank you all. Let's do it. Let's move humanity forward. Let's get it done. Thank you. Appreciate the heck out of you, Liam. That was a blast. I really would have done it all night.
Okay, that's amazing. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.
This concludes tonight's special event. Please follow the link at the closing of our event and watch for an email for the feedback survey. Thank you again for joining, and have a great evening.